They didn't even put my name on the program. Just technical advisor, Core Sync. No title, no credentials, no history. That was by design. They wanted me invisible. Wanted the tech to speak for itself. But in a conference room full of power suits, name badges, and legacy security firms, silence was a brand too. It was 2034. New Houston. The first national cybersecurity summit since the blackout crisis of '32. I stood backstage with a thumb drive in my pocket that could patch 92% of the world's vulnerable data bridges. And no one in the room knew I was the one who wrote the original lines of code. Not even the press recognized me when I walked past them. That's what anonymity buys you. Safety, or so I thought. The panel had just wrapped. The applause was fading. The moderator thanked the Whitaker cyber defense team for their continued contribution to civilian resilience. Cue the camera shift to my half-sister, Sloane Whitaker. She stood center stage in crimson, immaculate posture, flawless teeth, the air of a name she never built, the face of a firewall she didn't design. And then, with every mic still hot and live stream running, she said it. Before we close, I'd like to clarify something. There's been chatter about who really created Core Sync's spine. Let me be very clear. She turned, pointed directly at me, standing off stage in black, holding a maintenance tablet. She's not the architect. She's not even credentialed in system protocols. She's a fraud. Laughter, gasps. A few smartphones raised just fast enough to catch my face freeze. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Not because I was shocked, but because I had seen it coming. Sloane never started a war she hadn't already rehearsed. And this was her opening shot. I adjusted my grip on the tablet, not out of defense, but instinct. Because even in public humiliation, the system still ran on my code, and it was about to be tested for real. The silence after a public accusation isn't quiet. It breathes, expands, crawls under skin. I stood there, off stage, under blue-white lighting designed to flatter keynote speakers, not ghosts. Sloane smiled like she just dropped the punchline of a joke only she found funny. The crowd didn't laugh, but they didn't question her either. They didn't need proof. They had polish. And in that moment, Sloane Whitaker looked like everything this summit wanted to believe in: clean, composed, marketable. Me, I was the girl in black. No last name on the lanyard, no seat at the panel, no entourage, just the tech. And somehow that was now a threat. A junior engineer I had onboarded 6 months ago looked away when I met his eyes. Another adjusted her badge like she wasn't sure if being near me was a liability. Even the moderator mumbled something about clarifying affiliations before shuffling the next guest forward. No one asked me to respond, because no one wanted me to. Because what if she was right? I stepped away from the side curtain and walked slowly down the corridor behind the main stage. My boots didn't echo. The soundproof carpet had been laid for VIP privacy. Today, it muffled dignity. There was a time Sloane used to cling to my hoodie sleeves, asking if she could watch me code like in the movies. Back when we were still pretending to be sisters. Back before Whitaker Industries needed a face and buried the brain. She didn't destroy me with the push of a button. She did it with a phrase rehearsed like a weapon. She's not even credentialed. She knew exactly where to strike. Not in my pride, in my absence. Because in a room where no one knew me, not being seen was as dangerous as being erased. And Sloane didn't want applause. She wanted silence. Mine. The first warning came as a flicker. Stage lights dimmed for half a second, enough to make a few heads turn, but not enough to raise alarms. A technician muttered something into his headset. A screen behind the panelists froze mid-slide, then rebooted with a soft chime. The room adjusted, smiled, shrugged. Tech hiccups, it's a cybersecurity conference. Irony happens. But backstage I saw the dashboard, and I knew this wasn't irony. Core Sync's heartbeat had just skipped. The firewall I built, its pulse map visible only to admin-level monitors, flickered from green to amber across 5 sectors. Then red, a live breach, not simulated, not internal. Someone was inside the network. The summit servers, the badge systems, the civilian data demos, all of it was being touched. My fingers flew across the tablet. Failsafe 1 denied. Failsafe 2, access revoked. Failsafe 3 ghosted completely. Someone had hijacked the recovery protocol, and there was only one way that was possible. They'd used the Whitaker override key. I turned. The main stage was still broadcasting live. Sloan smiled and leaned into the mic, oblivious, or worse, prepared. Panic hadn't reached the room yet, but I could feel it pooling behind the glass of every device. A silent countdown was unfolding, not in seconds, but in systems. One by one, the defenses I'd designed were falling because someone had rewritten the permissions. Someone who didn't build it, didn't understand it, just inherited it. And suddenly, every eye in that room would be looking for someone to blame, but not yet, because before the blame comes the blackout. Behind me, an emergency light snapped on. In front of me, the tablet blinked a final error. Core sync, administrative override denied. And then, over the intercom, a single calm voice. Level 3 breach in progress, defensive access required, code origin unknown. I closed my eyes. Sloan had made me invisible, but now the system itself was demanding I be seen. The lights dropped. Not flickered, dropped. Every screen in the summit hall went black. The overhead switched to emergency red. The broadcast cut mid-sentence, leaving Sloan frozen on camera like a statue cracked down the center. A voice crackled over the PA. Steady, male, measured. Initiating lockdown protocol level 3, perimeter secure, admin access pending override. People stood, some pulled out phones, no signal. The stage crew scrambled. Techs shouted into headsets. The room that had ignored me just minutes ago now pulsed with real fear. And then the voice returned. Not through the PA this time, but through the secure line routed directly into the event's command server. I need eyes on Dr. Rowan Ayers. Immediately, every head turned. I didn't flinch, because I knew that voice. Agent Elias Monroe, Homeland Security Cyber Defense Division, and the only person in the building with clearance to speak that sentence. His image appeared on the emergency holo display at the back of the room, sharp-jawed, uniformed, dead calm. The core sync system currently protecting this summit, along with 4 civilian infrastructures across the country, was architected by Dr. Ayers, not Whitaker Cyber Defense, not the board, her. The silence that followed was louder than the breach alert. Sloane's eyes locked onto mine. For the first time that day, she blinked. Monroe continued. If you want this system back, you let her in. You let her lead, or you let the country watch you fail. No yelling, no drama, just truth delivered like a bullet. A technician rushed to me, handing over the uplink module, hands trembling. I didn't know, he whispered. I did, they never do until it's burning. I plugged in, typed 7 lines, then 1 more. Core sync rebooted, green across every sector, data restored, threat neutralized, screens flickered back to life, people stared, cameras captured, but I wasn't looking at them. I looked at Sloan, still standing on the stage she thought she owned. And this time she was the one without words. The breach was over. The system stabilized. Applause rippled, but it was hesitant, fragmented. The kind of clapping people do when they realize they've been clapping for the wrong person all along. No one officially thanked me. No press release. No public correction. Just a quiet update to the summit website. Security oversight provided by independent consultant. 3 days later, I was served. Plain envelope. Government seal. Notice of investigation. Unlawful system access. Misuse of federal architecture. Coercion by affiliation. The complaint, filed by Sloan Whitaker. Backed by Whitaker Cyber Defense. Endorsed by their legal counsel and her PR team. her opening allegation. Dr. Rowan Ayers used a pre-existing romantic relationship with Agent Elias Monroe to gain unauthorized access to federal systems, hijack intellectual property, and discredit the Whitaker legacy. I read the sentence 3 times, then laughed, out loud. The sound was hollow. Attached were screenshots, doctored emails spliced out of context. Photos of me and Elias from 5 years ago, reframed as recent. And worst of all, a forged development log suggesting I had reverse-engineered core sync from Whitaker prototypes. They were painting me not as a creator, but as a jilted ex with a vendetta. I wanted to scream. But in this war, volume wasn't defense. I reached out to Homeland Security. They confirmed Monroe had been placed on temporary leave pending conflict of interest review. My clearance was under pause. My credentials flagged. My inbox silent. My calendar empty. I had survived a digital ambush. But now I was walking into something worse. A legal execution dressed in corporate language. Sloan didn't need to break the system. She just needed to convince it I didn't belong. I closed the laptop and stared at my hands, the same ones that had written Core Sync's first line of code. She'd taken credit for my work. Now she wanted to erase my name from it entirely. This wasn't about firewalls anymore. This was about identity, and Sloan had declared war. She thought she could rewrite the code of history, but I had already time-stamped mine. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, I'd lived through worse, but because of memory. The long hours in 2029 spent writing Core Sync's first protocol in a windowless lab under emergency contract. No assistants, no board, no Sloan, just me, a borrowed cot and a government-issued black box console, and a camera. Mandatory security measure at the time. Most engineers hated it. Me, I kept it running. 1 month of raw footage, every line of code I wrote, every bug I killed, every test I failed and fixed, all watermarked, all digitally hashed and signed on the federal blockchain. Immutable, undeniable, forgotten by everyone except me. At 3:12 a.m., I pulled the backup drive from my safe and loaded the original video into a secure node. 7 hours later, it was in the hands of the Federal Ethics Commission, along with a notarized affidavit from Agent Monroe, authenticated chat logs with date chains, the original build report filed under Project Halcyon. Before Whitaker ever touched a copy, the evidence didn't scream. It whispered, cold, precise, untouchable. By the end of the week, Sloan's legal team withdrew their motion. By the following Monday, Homeland Security reinstated Monroe. And 3 days after that, I received a call. No apology. Just an offer. We'd like you to serve as Deputy Director of Civilian Military Ethics in Digital Infrastructure. It wasn't a reward, it was responsibility. The kind they give to someone who's been scorched but stayed standing. Sloan didn't show up again. Not at the hearing, not on camera, not even to deny it. She didn't need to. She'd already lost. Not because I destroyed her, but because I refused to disappear. Truth had taken longer, but it arrived, wearing no makeup, carrying no spotlight, just walking, quiet and undeniable. They never issued a press statement. There was no headline that read, "She was right." Just a quiet note added to the summit's archive. Technical oversight and recovery support credited to independent architect R. Ayers. 3 lines. After 3 years of work and 3 weeks of war, that was fine, because I wasn't rebuilding for the cameras. I was rebuilding for me. The office they gave me at the new Civilian Military Ethics Division wasn't large. No windows, no gold plaque. Just a desk, a server terminal, and a pin. A small symbol engraved with 3 words, integrity through design. I wore it on the inside of my jacket, not for display, but to remember who I'd chosen to stay. Monroe didn't return to Homeland Security. He declined his reinstatement. Instead, he sent me one message. "Let them remember your name for the right reasons. I'll be exactly where you don't need to look." I never replied, but I kept the message. Some truths don't need echo, just presence. Months passed. Sloan vanished from headlines. Whitaker Cyber Defense lost its government contract quietly. No scandal, just reallocation. And I began to teach, not just code, but clarity, to young officers, to civilian developers, to every idealist who thought being right was enough. I told them what no one told me. You don't win by yelling louder. You win by refusing to vanish. Sometimes the loudest justice is restraint. Sometimes the most radical revenge is not becoming what tried to break you. And sometimes, what saves the system is the woman they tried to erase from it. One day, I passed a recruit reading a digital ethics handbook I hadn't realized they'd named after me. He looked up, didn't salute, just said, "Thank you for staying." And for the first time in years, I believed I had.